Protein, most people associate eggs with protein, but what do we see when we look at the macronutrients in one egg or 100 grams of egg? 13 grams of protein, 11 grams of fat, and 1 gram of carbohydrates. So if we actually look at the calorie content, where do most of the calories come from in these foods that we've got pictured here? So if we look down in the bottom right hand corner, we can see a note here highlighted in red shows where most of the calories are coming from. So this indicates of those three main macronutrients, protein, fat and carbs, this indicates where most of the calories come from in 100 gram portions of these foods. So we can actually see that one whole egg or 100 grams of whole egg, so this is the egg white and the egg yolk, most of the calories or the majority of the calories, not all of the calories, but the majority, when we look at that split, the majority come from fat. The more you learn about eggs, the more you'll understand that eggs are one of the most nutritionally dense foods that we can eat, but we have different components of the egg. So we have the egg white and the egg yolk. The egg yolk is predominantly where the fat source is. Okay, so this is why you can buy, as a food product, we can buy egg whites. Okay, and this is essentially just the protein from the egg, or mostly protein from the egg, without the fat. And also this means that that colourful part of the egg, this is where we have a lot of the nutrients coming from the egg. Almonds, predominantly the calories here are coming from fat. We also have a good amount of protein, and we also have a good amount of carbs. So that's quite an evenly distributed split between protein, fat and carbs, although the majority again is coming from fats. So if we look at banana, we can see a very small amount of protein, less than 1 gram of fat, so minute amount of fat in this particular food, and the carbs that we're getting are where most of the calories are coming from. When we look at salmon, again, great source of food. Salmon would be a very good choice of healthy fats, and that's actually where most of your calories are coming from. When we look at the breakdown of 100 grams of salmon, we get a good amount of protein, but we also get a high amount of calories through the fats. Now, this isn't to be feared because this is actually a great source of fat. This would be a polyunsaturated source of fat, a healthy type of fat. And we've got pretty much zero carbs in that salmon. Chicken breast, okay, this is the perfect choice for protein because we actually get all of the protein with a very, very minimal amount of fat and pretty much zero carb. Carrots, okay, mostly a carb source, no fats, tiny amount of protein. And potato, here we can see tiny amount of protein, almost minimal fats, and it's predominantly a carbohydrate source. In red, that is where the majority of the calories are coming from. It is also a common mistake for those who are starting to learn about tracking calories and macronutrients. Let's take a look on the left, 100 grams of chicken breast, okay, 97 calories worth. This gives us 20 grams of protein. If we were striving towards hitting a 100 gram protein target, okay, this is not the same as 100 grams of the actual food containing protein. Okay, so 100 grams of protein as a macronutrient is not the same as 100 grams of the chicken breast, which contains protein. Now, to some of you, this may seem very obvious, but this is a source of confusion because we measure both things in grams. Down in the bottom right hand corner, in order to reach your protein macronutrient target, if that target was 100 grams, you would need to consume approximately 500 grams of the actual food weight of chicken breast. Okay, and the summary for that to the left of the picture on the right, the food weight, 500 grams, the calories about 485, and that gives us our target of 100 grams of protein. Okay, so we can see how the two different things are measured in grams, but they're completely separate. In order for us to achieve 100 grams of protein through chicken breast alone, we need 500 grams of that actual food weight. The Greek word for protein is proteos, and this is appropriately translated because it means primary or taking first place. So this is a very important reminder of how vital protein is to your human life and existence. We have something called anabolism, and this is the process of building new tissue. while we also have on the flip side of that catabolism. So anabolic is something you may have heard before, anabolic steroids, that type of thing. And then we have catabolic. So catabolism in metabolism terms is the breakdown of tissue. So anabolism, or your anabolic state, is increased following the ingestion of food, in particular protein, because this provides your body with the important amino acids you need to build new muscle tissue. Protein, amino acids, this is what it gets broken down into. This is what we need to build new muscle tissue. And within your muscles, it is also the contractile proteins that actually allow your muscles to contract. Okay, so we have certain types of proteins that are super important for your muscle contraction. This is all based around protein. These are built on protein. So higher protein intakes are also associated with a healthier bone mass. Protein also plays a key role in your appetite management, being a much more satiating type of food. So what do we mean by that? It does a really great job of satisfying your hunger. It makes you feel full when you eat it. This becomes especially important when you're trying to manage your calorie intake, especially for fat loss. Okay, so when we are having a fat loss goal, we need to manage the amount of calories. So it pays us to fill up on foods that are more satiating. Okay, and protein is a huge one for that. Now, as you'll all know, building muscle also, if your goal is to build muscle, we also need regular protein because, as we just touched on, protein is broken down to amino acids, which are the building blocks of your new muscle tissue. So how important is protein for your goals? Well, for any body composition goals, the sole purpose of protein is to maximize your lean muscle gain, or at the very least, retaining all of the muscle that you have through a diet, and also to minimize your muscle loss. Okay, so we want to protect the amount of muscle that you have through adequate protein in the diet. So this principle does apply to both men and women of any age. So it's typical for some women to think that they don't need much protein. Now, while you may not need as much, the role of protein within the human body is still essential. And for that reason, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, we just need consistent protein. The reality is that most people are not actually consuming enough protein. With the addition of regular strength training also, naturally your protein requirement is going to increase because the demands that you place on your body when we need to repair and build the tissues of the body being stimulated through your training, that is going to increase because of the nature of strength training. Although your protein intake may feel difficult at first, having more muscle mass makes managing your health, fitness, and body composition much, much easier in the long run. Okay, when we can build a stronger body, we teach your metabolism to operate at a higher level because muscle mass is slightly more costly in terms of maintaining that metabolism. So it pays you to actually build muscle and strength over time because this establishes a stronger metabolism, and this makes managing your body composition therefore much easier in the long run. If your protein intake is currently too low, we need to think about increasing this as a priority. Once you've improved this, changes in your body composition become easier to achieve and also to maintain long term. So let's think about it like this. Keeping hold of as much muscle mass as possible during your fat loss diet helps you to reveal the definition that you want, the shape you want to see as you become a leaner version of yourself. Your body is individual, so when we look at calories, macronutrients, we want to think about the variances between people, their lifestyle, and the various other factors that affect their requirement. Individual protein requirements are specific to you and your body. There are several factors that influence how much you may need, and we also need to consider personal preference is going to be important. However, you can't afford to overlook the importance of protein overall in favour of simply eating what you feel like eating day to day. In 6 to 12 months' time, your body will be a direct reflection of the type of diet you've eaten. Therefore, to improve your body composition, you need to improve the composition of your diet. So if you're somebody who has the majority of your calories being eaten by carbohydrates, for example, and you're not eating enough healthy fats, you're not eating enough protein, it makes sense for your body composition to be soft, not well developed, not muscular, not showing definition, because the nature of almost the majority of your diet has been made up of foods that don't complement looking that way. So we have to think about this old saying that you are what you eat, because essentially what you fuel your body on is going to be influencing your results heavily. Now, there are some variables that we want to consider for your protein target. As you can see here, there's a list: age, gender, body fat, the amount of muscle mass you have, your goal, the type of training that you do, your training frequency, energy availability. So for example, how many calories are you consuming? Are you in a surplus? Are you in a deficit? Because we can adjust protein based on those goals. Other things like dietary preferences. Are you somebody who doesn't eat any animal protein, for example, vegan, vegetarian? Different dietary preferences are individual to you. Your dieting history. For example, are you somebody who's consuming next to no protein at all? Well, for us to give you a protein target of 150 grams straight from the gate, that's going to be difficult for you to go from zero protein to, adequate protein servings. So we need to look at a step-by-step process. Let's try and get consistent with one protein serving in our main meals. We want a good serving of protein in one of our main meals. Let's try and make that stick before we start thinking too much about the bigger targets, which may be further away for you at the moment. Also, your rate of loss, so fat loss specific there in terms of the goal. How quickly do we want to lose body fat? For example, if we're taking a very slow and steady approach, we can have a much more balanced diet. If we're being a bit more extreme with our calorie reduction, it is very, very sensible for us to increase our protein, even way past the recommended muscle building bracket of protein that we want to try and fall into. So again, this is down to specificity, how quickly we're trying to progress. And lastly, energy expenditure. So your overall amount of energy expenditure, we want to consider how much of a cost that comes out in terms of the protein that you're going to turn over. Regardless of these variables, aim to build all of your main meals around good quality sources of protein. And we prioritize your protein first. You also need to make sure you stay consistent with it as well. Complete versus incomplete. This is coming down to protein quality. Protein in foods becomes available for use by the body after they've been broken down into amino acids, which we just discussed. 9 of these amino acids are what we consider as essential. Therefore, the quality of the dietary protein that you consume is tied very closely to the content of these 9 essential amino acids. Protein containing foods can be broken down generally into the 2 categories. So this is high quality protein. This would be a complete protein, and a low quality protein would be an incomplete protein. A complete protein contains, you might have guessed, all of the essential amino acids needed by humans. Sources of complete protein are mostly going to be of animal origin. This is foods such as milk, yogurt, cheese, eggs, meat, fish, poultry. So for example, protein supplements that are animal based, these tend to be a great source, and this is essentially made from the same processes as what we do when we make milk and cheese and dairy products. Okay, it's the protein filtered and manipulated, so we just get the protein from those. On the flip side of that, incomplete proteins, these are found in plant foods. Okay, so we're looking at things like legumes, lentils, peas, nuts, seeds, vegetables, and cereals and grains. Most of these tend to have too little of one or more of the essential amino acids that we need to make a complete protein. Okay, and there's two exceptions to this when we're looking at incomplete proteins. The exceptions being soy and quinoa, okay, because these are actually complete plant proteins. Okay, so 2 options there that are quite good if you are on a vegan-based diet. For example, including more soy and quinoa in your diet can be a very good way to up your complete protein intake, so your quality of your protein intake. Plant proteins also have a lower digestibility due to the presence of fiber. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about carbs and fiber in our carbs section. Several types of plant proteins need to be combined in order to achieve this complete protein intake at meal times. So if you are a vegan or vegetarian and you're very limited, you're limiting your protein intake through animal proteins, we need to be quite smart with how we go about building our meals, and we need to actually try and combine, for example, 2, 3, 4 different types of foods so that we can try and make up for the pitfalls in the amino acid profile of those various foods. So some foods may have certain amino acids, other foods may have a different selection of amino acids. So when we pull those foods together, we can get a much more complete source of protein and a more complete protein intake, therefore. In terms of digestibility, animal proteins are generally going to be from 90% to 99% digestible. Okay, this means that your body is able to digest and use that protein. Plant proteins are 80% or less digestible. Okay, and this is mainly due to the presence of fiber, because this is a bit more resistant to digestion. Next up, thermic effect. Now, you should be familiar with this diagram, the total daily energy expenditure. One of the components of your TDEE is the thermic effect of food, which we've briefly touched on in the energy balance section. This represents the metabolic response to the food that you eat. And you may have also heard of this before as diet-induced thermogenesis. This is just another name for the same thing. What this is an increase in the energy expended when you are processing the calories that you eat. This is due to the normal processes that your body goes through, digesting the food, absorbing it, transporting it around your body, general metabolism, and the storage of the energy that you ingest through your meals. Now, what we know is that the total sum of this thermic effect of your diet as a whole is around about 10% of the overall diet is essentially used up in energy, because the normal processes that your body goes through, digestion, absorption, transporting the nutrients around your body, etc., these things cost energy, okay, because this is your organs and your body doing its job to keep you alive. Each macronutrient also has a slightly different thermic effect. Now, the super important one here that we're most interested in is protein. When we look at the differences here, we can see the thermic effect of protein 20 to 30%. The dietary fats thermic effect 0 to 5%, and carbohydrates 5 to 10%. So it's obvious here we have a substantial difference in the potential thermic effect of protein in comparison to dietary fats and carbohydrates. This translates to, if more of your diet is based around protein, we are actually going to have a metabolism which has to work slightly harder to actually digest and use that energy and break down that food to use it in the body where it's required. Essentially, that is going to ramp up your metabolism a little bit more than dietary fats and carbohydrates. So when we base all of our meals around protein, and even some of our snacks around protein, this comes at a higher cost in terms of the thermic effect. Now, a little bit more on this. How does this affect your diet? So, as we just discussed, a high protein diet will slightly increase the positive effects that you get from the thermic effects of food or feeding. In terms of metabolism, this does equate to some small differences in the energy burn through digesting and utilizing that protein consumed. The increased energy required to break down and assimilate that protein when compared with those other nutrients. This is an important factor to consider when we set up your diet. So they may be small in isolation, but over time, and this is what we always want to think about when it comes to diet, nothing that we do is going to give you an immediate result. We're looking at improving your body over time, improving your diet over time, and it's what we do on average then that compounds and gives us the effect that we're looking for. So if we can have the end result being easier management of a leaner, healthier body composition, then of course that protein intake, regular protein intake, tends to start paying you back. The more muscle you develop, the easier it becomes to maintain that body. So if we look at this in terms of calories, if we were to consume 100 calories of protein, fats and carbs, the actual amount of calories that we are left over with would be from protein. If we've got a 20 to 30% thermic effect, if we just ate protein, we would only end up with 70 to 80 calories left over in the body to be used. Fat, for example, we would end up with that 95 to 100 calories left because the thermic effect is very small, 0 to 5%. And with carbohydrates, if you consumed 100 calories of carb, we're looking at a 5 to 10% effect, results in terms of calories, 90 to 95 calories left over in the body to be used once it's been broken down, digested, transported around your body, or stored as necessary. Any small changes you can make to your diet that offer a big return long term, this should always be prioritized. Okay, we think about low hanging fruit, easy changes we can make that pay us off long term when they compound, and we do this day after day. So regardless of your personal preferences, we should all be aiming for a higher protein intake long term, and this will help you to maximize your results. Let's look a little bit more specifically now at your actual protein requirement. We touched on the fact that some of these things are individual and based around some of your preferences and lifestyle factors. However, we have some general recommendations that we can make. Now, all of you guys are going to be performing some form of resistance training. Okay, this means that you fall into the bracket of what we want to do to support that. So now you understand why we need more protein. We're going to look at exactly how much you need, and we're going to kind of try and simplify these equations so that you understand it, and we can work out how much protein you need to be aiming for. As I mentioned, resistance training takes you into a different bracket of requirement. So we're not sedentary, we're not an endurance athlete, we are actually breaking down the tissues of your body and trying to force them to become stronger. With that, we need to support this through diet, recovery, protein most importantly. In order for us to maximize your muscular development, we need to achieve a protein target of 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. This is a bracket that we can aim to fall in, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. This is the requirement that we should all be working towards. For example, if you weigh 100 kilograms, this is your total body weight, 1.6 grams of protein, 1.6 times 100 kilograms, and very simply, that is 160 grams of protein, and that is consumed daily. So that is your protein target each day. If you weigh 80 kilograms and you wanted to shoot for that higher end of the scale, 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So 2.2 times 80 gives us 176 grams of protein. If you weigh 60 kilograms and you want to shoot for 2 grams per kilogram, 2 times 60 equals 120. So simple calculations. From there, we want to try and track how close we're getting to those targets. In terms of building muscle, there may not be any more benefit to consuming higher than 1.6 per kilogram of body weight. However, we also need to consider, where is your protein coming from? So many of you will be tracking your calories and macronutrients using an app such as MyFitnessPal. However, what we will see there when we look at your totals is we will see that some of the other foods that you consume, for example, we touched on incomplete proteins. So we get incomplete proteins from lots of other things. Some of your protein target will be made up of incomplete proteins. So let's say we just about get to our target, or we're just short of our target of 1.6 grams. Potentially we could still be falling a little bit short there. So it may be wise for us to aim a little bit higher. Check in with the amount of protein you're consuming. Are you getting enough complete protein? Also, for individuals who may be aggressively restricting calories and more aggressively attacking a fat loss diet, or for those people who are at the tail end of a fat loss diet and you're trying to get that last few kilograms or even pounds or even grams of body fat off, you are much better placed to increase your protein, because this is going to do a really good job of protecting you from any unnecessary loss of your lean muscle mass. So we would be much wiser to shoot for the higher end of that target if we really want to drive those fat loss results. Not only because you're going to need to restrict your calories, but also because it gives you the satiety, so we feel full for longer when we eat a high protein diet. But we also make sure we get enough complete protein, which does a much better job of helping you recover and maintain and potentially even still build lean muscle mass. Very high protein intakes are safe in those with kidneys that are already healthy. So you may have heard before, protein can damage your kidneys. This myth has long been debunked. No pre-existing kidney problems that you're aware of. You have absolutely no reason to be worried about excessive protein consumption damaging your kidneys. Most people can't even consume excessive amount of protein regularly enough to even get them to the point where that could be something that you would need to worry about, okay? Because of the fact that protein is so much more filling than other types of foods. Most people struggle to even eat that much protein in the first place. So we need to not worry about that because it's long been proven to be incorrect and outdated. Very high protein intakes are safe. So even up to the very, very high end of the scale. So we talked about 1.6 to 2.2, but in those individuals who may just really like protein, or they may be really trying to get extremely lean, they may be trying to maximize protein intake over everything else, 3 to 4 grams per kilogram of body weight has still been shown to be safe. We need to consider if we're consuming that much protein, this becomes less practical because it's just a little bit too extreme in reality. The further you push past that 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, the less calories, because remember, calories are still your priority. If we're going to stick to our calorie target, calories are important. We want to fill those with an adequate amount of protein. But the more we try and push that protein target up, the result of that is that we have less calories left over to assign to dietary fats and carbohydrates, which is where you get your energy from, and it's where you get your food enjoyment from. Okay, so the flexibility that you need to actually make your adherence with your diet, we tend to get this through foods that contain dietary fats and carbohydrates. So a super high protein intake may be achievable for a short period of time. Long term, this is not really sustainable and it's not really practical in terms of building a balanced diet that you can actually enjoy. Also, we have protein timing. We need to consider the timing of when we actually get our protein servings. After sleeping, when you wake up, this is from a fasted state. You're fasting overnight, essentially, because we're not consuming anything while we sleep. This means you're more likely to be in a catabolic state because we don't have those calories circulating and being digested, which is, as we spoke about previously, this gives us a more of an anabolic signal to the body. So we know there's energy available, so your body can actually do the things that it needs to do to build. So when we wake up, if we're catabolic, we're potentially breaking down the tissues of your body for the essential nutrients that may not be available. During periods of energy restriction, such as a fat loss diet, this may be more significant. Therefore, it would make sense to ensure that a high protein breakfast is consumed, not once a week, not twice a week, every single day. We should be aiming to get a consistent high protein breakfast. Whenever your breakfast is, whether it's 6 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m. is irrelevant. Breakfast, by breakfast we mean your first meal essentially. We just need to make sure that when you wake, the first thing in your meal planning for breakfast to be considered is protein. Generally speaking, if you are consuming between 3 to 5 adequate protein servings per day, you don't really need to stress about the timing of your protein, because if you're consuming 3 to 5 servings per day, you'll regularly be already providing your body with those nutrients required. Assuming you're meeting your minimum daily protein target, the timing becomes a little bit less of a worry. For muscular recovery, it would be beneficial to ensure that at least 30 grams of protein is consumed either side of your training. So we don't need to do this immediately. However, being aware of your meal timing around your training, particularly for fat loss, because you may be a little bit low on energy because we're not consuming heaps of calories, within 2 to 3 hours, having some protein in your diet either side of training is going to be very beneficial for your recovery process. Including some fast acting, easily digestible protein in the form of a supplement can therefore be a super easy and practical solution, not only achieving your total requirement, but also just making sure that we're consuming protein frequently enough. So it's very easy for you to have a protein shaker with some protein powder ready to go for after your session or before your session even. And this is just much more accessible than if you're in a hurry, for example, cooking a meal or preparing a meal if you're unprepared. This isn't always practical when you need it. Supplements can bridge that gap. In summary, on this page, protein consumption is most important following your periods of fasting. Okay, so when you wake from sleeping, there is no protein in your system essentially. Around your training sessions, where we have a higher demand for protein, this makes it even more important again for protein in the body. So make it easier to achieve your daily protein target by consuming protein every few hours, or at the very least during your main meal times. Using supplements to bolster your protein intake is going to be helpful. Okay, summary. Protein, we're going to quickly run through the points that we've touched on and summarize everything you need to know about protein. Protein is essential and must be consumed regularly, as it cannot be stored in your body in the same way that fats and carbs are stored in your body for energy. 3 to 5 servings per day would be the optimal range. If we were to only consume 1 to 2 servings per day, this means that if we're going to achieve our daily target, those servings need to be increased. The serving size needs to be increased if the frequency is reduced. Okay, 1 to 2 servings, bigger servings. 3 to 5 servings can be smaller servings. 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per meal will help you to maximally promote muscle gains. Again, 3 to 5 servings per day, 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight per meal. Actual food weights are not the same as macronutrient targets in grams. We need to prioritize your total protein intake each day before worrying too much about the meal distribution, the exact timing and the distribution of the protein per meal. The bigger picture, total, being more important than the smaller details. Protein is generally much more satiating, which is super helpful for regulating the rest of your diet, so the rest of your calorie intake. If we can feel full for longer, we're going to have an easier time restricting calories for fat loss. The thermic effect of protein is higher, which is helpful for managing your body composition again. High quality protein is again more suitable if you want to build muscle and improve your body composition. And of those higher quality proteins, we need to think about animal protein sources. These are generally going to be better because of the quality and also because of the digestibility. They're going to be more digestible to your body. Low protein quality, they're essentially not going to give you what you need from the protein. So as we mentioned, the essential amino acids in a low quality, incomplete protein, you may not get enough of them. Generally, plant-based proteins, soy and quinoa, are going to be complete, so we can separate those because they're slightly better in terms of the quality. Most other plant protein sources you will find to be incomplete, slightly lower quality in terms of the protein that you get from it. Not to say that the other nutrients don't give you lots of other good qualities, but the protein quality is reduced, more so with the plant-based options. Several plant-based protein sources do need to be combined. If we have an incomplete protein, we then want to try and bunch together 2 to 3 different types of plant-based sources to bump up the quality of that protein at your meal times. Protein supplements can be a super convenient, easy way to help you bump up your target and get closer to your daily protein intake that you're looking to achieve. Protein requirement is increased if you take part in regular training, particularly strength training. It is actually of the amino acids, it is actually leucine of those amino acids which triggers muscle protein synthesis. This is going to happen only if you consume regular and sufficient quantities of high quality protein. The minimum amount we want to trigger a good response in terms of recovery and muscle building, we need to think about at least 25 grams of protein per serving. No matter what you do with your diet, whether you're trying to restrict calories for a meal out in the evening, for example, if we're going to have a meal and we're going to swap and change things to try and suit the calories that we may want to consume more of later, we still need to try and think about having consistent protein intake, trying to aim for at least 25 grams of protein per serving to get the maximal benefit from the protein itself. So in summary, daily protein requirement, if you are strength training, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay, that is it for protein. I know that was a fairly big one, but thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video where we're going to be looking at dietary fats.